Just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the...
Yes, ma'am. May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising.
Okay.
I can't stop watching little snippets of this Kamala Harris interview because it is so bad. It is so bad, folks. Honestly, I think this might be the final nail in the coffin. Kamala Harris was doing so much better when she wasn't talking. When she wasn't doing interviews, when she was hiding, she was doing so much better. And that strategy was working out for her. And it was working out for Tim, too. Because every time Tim Walz speaks, he lies, he gets caught in lies, and he says something stupid. Almost worse than Kamala Harris. But, of course, he's running for vice president. Kamala Harris is running for president, so she's the main focus here. But you can even see it in the polls, folks. You can see it in the betting. You can look at the numbers. As soon as she started sitting down and doing a couple of interviews, and I'm talking about the softball interviews, with her allies, with her best friends. Some of them were probably her sorority sisters, like the lady that officiated the debate between her and Donald Trump. But as soon as she started talking, she started plummeting in the polls, and that is all it takes, folks. Because I think for the most part, people know what they're getting with Donald Trump. They know what Donald Trump is about. He's hammered his message home for years and years and years. A lot of people didn't want to believe him. And then they saw how the last 4 years went. So I think in many ways, Donald Trump's campaign, it kind of speaks for itself, right? You could take Donald Trump and everything he says out of the equation. You could just look at how life has been over the last 4 years. And you know that Kamala Harris has been a part of that. So in many ways, like I said, Donald Trump and his campaign, it speaks for itself. Whereas Kamala Harris, as soon as she starts speaking for herself, it's game over, folks. It's game over. And we always knew it, and they knew it too. And I'm thinking maybe they started getting a little too cocky. Maybe they thought things were going too well for them. Maybe they got a little too confident, started dipping their toe in the water a little bit more, and now Kamala Harris is out there getting absolutely eviscerated. Let's go ahead and roll another clip of her getting absolutely destroyed, and then I'll be right back with more thoughts.
He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
You see how visibly frustrated she gets? How rattled she gets when she is pressed in just the slightest? Because she can't defend her track record. She can't defend the last 4 years. She can't defend most of the things that she's been preaching for years. And the reality is, she doesn't even stand behind half that crap, because the reality is, that's an empty brain. Kamala Harris is an idiotic bimbo that has no place being where she's at right now, let alone president. She had no business being vice president. She had no business ever holding any form of office. She had no business ever being a prominent figure of society. She literally didn't, and that is evidently clear every time you hear her talk. She talks in her circles, she says things that don't make sense, and it sounds smart to dumb people. And there's so many politicians that are like that. It's not just Kamala, but Kamala is the one that's running for president. She has the audacity to try to run for president, knowing in her mind, and her campaign knows it too, that whenever she sits down and people really ask her real questions, it's not going to work out. Because, yes, she can't defend her past and what she's done, but also, she doesn't really have any original thoughts in her mind. She's totally out of her league every time she sits down and does an interview. Meanwhile, they're dragging Trump through court. They're trying to literally unalive Trump every chance they get. Trump's doing 4 or 5 of these hostile interviews every single day like it's nothing, and then goes and plays golf afterwards. You know, this little interview that just led to a complete meltdown for Kamala Harris, this is your average interview for Donald Trump. He does 2 or 3 of these a day. Then he goes and plays golf, and then he does a rally. Meanwhile, Kamala's just absolutely like I said, she's just destroyed. She's in shambles from 10 minutes of sitting down with Fox News. From 10 minutes. They had to yank her out of the interview in the middle of questions. It's so crazy. But that's where we're at. This is one of the wildest elections I think we may ever see. But you let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell. And if you find yourself getting too worked up by all of this, remember, it's just political cinema.